and welcome to the final part, hopefully, of this tutorial series. Today we'll talk about optimization and polishing, and what it actually means. Since last time I've done some polishing and some optimization as well, because that took a while, so hence I did make a video of it. With polishing, what I mean with polishing is that you add the final touches to your, for example, to your cave. In this case then. For example, what I've done here with the gate, when it starts closing, when it actually closes, it spawns a portal system like that. So it just gets a bit, it just feels that it's a bit more grounded, that it actually has some weight to it, because when something heavy falls on the ground, it's, well, you get some dust, right? So that sort of stuff I did. Also added a tiny water drop. I'll show it here. Hope you can see it, but that one. It's just a very simple particle system that spawns a particle system on collision. So nothing really fancy. And one other thing that's actually really helpful as well are probes. There are several types of probes that you can use inside Unity. One is called a reflection probe, which is nothing more than a way of making sure that everything that is not static also gets the reflections from the scene, because everything is baked right now, everything's turned to static, so it doesn't really function that well. The other types of probes that you can use are light probes, which are actually really helpful, because for example, I don't know why my lighting's fucked up all of a sudden. One sec, I'll just hit play. Hope everything's fixed again. Okay, fixed. Oh, there it is. Right now everything is baked, the lighting is baked into our actual mesh, into our textures. But when something is not static, for example our rock that's coming down the stairs, our boulder, it will not actually get lighting from the scene, because everything is turned static. But when you use, for example, light probes, non-static objects can get the lighting from the static objects, so the actual lights here as well. Light probes are nothing more than small spheres that sample the light on these certain positions. So what I did, for example, here is I just put probe everywhere around this room. You can say here, and one in the center, so the lighting gets blended between all these probes, and non-static objects will get the lighting from the probes. So it's a very efficient way of lighting non-static objects. Otherwise, they simply wouldn't get light from the lights, for example, over here. So that's really helpful. I did it for all the major rooms. So one here as well, and one here as well. I didn't do it for everything, because most objects, well, the ones that you can see are static, or except for the enemies. But I mean, I don't care that much that they don't actually get the lighting, because we just use a particle system on it anyway that lights the entire creature. So it's not really that important. But for this part here, it is actually important because of the boulder coming down the stairs. So we also want to get it to have some lighting information from the scene. Otherwise, it's gonna look very weird and very off-putting. So hence I put it there. You can just make them by going to Game Object, Light, and then Light Probe Group, and then just place the spheres where you want them to be. In this case, I put them around here. You need to make a volume, so one on the bottom and one on the top. So, because then it can actually sample the lighting properly. Otherwise, you'll just get the lighting from above, for example, or from the ground. You want to have a bit more information than that. So hence hence you need a volume like here. You can also add probes here by just clicking add probe, for example. So it's very helpful process to do so, which I hope you will. So one other part where we could really optimize actually was in the scripts. So far we've used GameObject.find. It works fine, but it's not very efficient, because when you find an object, it has to go through the entire hierarchy over here on the left side. It has to go through all the objects till it finds the actual object that it wants. So it's very it's dirty. It works, but it's dirty. So what I did is I made a public game object for pretty much everything that I have. So I was able to replace all the game objects.find with the actual game object. So for example, the player here, he now has a bunch of slots that you can put stuff in, like the flashlight, health bar, death message, player depth sound, etc., etc. And then you can just get the component from that object. For example, the light here. What we had first was light. My light is schema object dot find flashlight dot intensity, blah blah. It's just, it works fine, don't get me wrong, but it's just very inefficient. So we actually can get rid of these as well. So this is the more efficient way of coding, except for this part here, because we still need to find the objects with the tag enemy, and that has to be done on the fly. So hence that's not changed. So. But here as well, you get to play grunt.get component audio source .play. It's just a bit more efficient. It's a bit more of a sexy solution to programming. It's in C#, and by doing this, you also get a, well, probably a pat on the back from the actual programmers, because it's very efficient doing it like this. So I hope you will keep this in mind. You just make a public game object, so you can drag an object in that slot and then just get the component, for example, here. It's a bit more efficient. I did it for every script that I had. Oh, they all now have a public slot, like public game object, public game objects. It's prettier, okay? It's just prettier. Let me put it that way. It's just a bit prettier, okay. So I want to talk about occlusion culling right now. It's very efficient way of optimizing your frame rate. I mean, when I play now, I mean, the frame rate isn't that bad. It's 30. It's not great, but it's not bad, right? You get a frame rate of 30 FPS. We need to improve that, because it works, but it's not great. So what happens right now in the scene when we play, as you see in the actual inspector or the actual editor, the entire scene is loaded and everything is playing right now. So every particle system is playing, every animation is playing, these spots here. Even though we're still standing here, everything is playing. So it's a very inefficient way. And when, for example, look to the right, even though we can't see anything, the objects in the background are still being rendered out, so they're still being drawn. It's not. It's bad. Okay, it's just bad. You don't want to do that, because that will be a major FPS hog. So we want to avoid that. You can do it by using occlusion culling. And occlusion culling just means that if something is not in view, it's not being rendered, which is perfect. But it's done by a mesh by mesh method. So if a mesh is visible, it draws it. If a mesh is not visible, it doesn't draw it. But the way we had it before, still have it here somewhere, the cave one here, for example. So we got two caves right now, like this one. Just zoom out here a little bit. You see, I do a little bit neat, there and that. Okay. So you have these two objects here, for example. These are two parts, right? I'm just gonna put a wireframe. There you go. So when we now use occlusion culling, and for example, we're standing in this part over here. This mesh here won't get drawn. That'll just be removed. But this entire part here will still be visible to the render engine. So it's not very efficient. So what I did, I'll show you what I did actually. I chopped up my level. Let me zoom in for a little bit. So I chopped it up in several parts. So we got one part here, for example, and one part here, here. So these are all different parts. That means that the occlusion engine or the occlusion culling can actually chop off more parts than just the entire level. So how does it work? Well, you can actually just go to Window and occlusion culling here. And right now I've got nothing baked. So I'm going to show you, I'm just hit clear. And I'm going to hit bake. And I'm going to show you what happens for now. See, it starts making these cubes. The occlusion cubes, not put it that way. It's not computing it. Let's just wait for a few seconds till it's done. And almost. The boring part, we'll just wait. Well, I might as well spoil what I'm going to do next. Next video will be designing an actual HUD. It sounds very easy, but it's actually a very difficult thing to do, designing a well-made HUD, heads-up user interface. No, that's wrong. Heads-up display, sorry, it's very wrong. Heads-up display. Because there are actually 4 types of HUDs that you can use in a game, and it's something most people don't know. So that's something I'm gonna focus on next video, about the actual theory behind HUD. Oh, there it is, much better. Okay, so now when I hit play, for example, let's just hit play. You can see here only this part here is being rendered, and the rest here is not. Oh, I might just turn those gizmos. So now when I start moving around, let's just go here. For some reason the sound doesn't work, but let's all live. Oh, you can see now a different part is actually rendered. So this part here is not being rendered. So I'm just gonna go that way. And now this part is being rendered. So it is a very efficient way of doing stuff. So even like the stairs here aren't being rendered, just the parts that we need. So this part here, this mesh, we could have done even better. So we can actually chop this part even more. So we just have very few parts actually being rendered out. But for now I'm like, eh. You can see the wireframe. Oh, only this part is being rendered. This part is just being disregarded. So let's quickly go to the settings here. You've got the smallest occluder here, the smallest object that you want to hide. In this case, our case, that's the actual light. This part here, this is the smallest object that we want to hide. So we could set it to 2, for example, and then we got the smallest hole. So the smallest hole in the geometry through which the camera is supposed to see. We can make this a little bit bigger probably, and then the back face threshold. We could tone this down, for example. Just gonna show you what happens. I'm gonna set this one to 10. I'm just gonna show you what happens. Okay, so you can see right now that the cubes get a lot bigger, a whole lot bigger. So when we set this one to 1 and bake it again, they become a lot smaller. A lot smaller. In this case it's not that useful because most objects are pretty big, so I'm gonna hit cancel. But this is, for example, very helpful if you have a scene with a lot of stone, for example, like pebbles. This would be very helpful, so that instead of like 10 pebbles being hidden, you only get 1, so you could actually tone this down even more. I'm not gonna do this because this will take forever to actually bake. So the smallest occluder is linked to your smallest object in the scene which you want to hide. In this case my objects aren't that big, so I'm gonna hit something like 3. Let's make this one really big, like 10. And you can see that it starts doing the grid again. Should be done soon. Pretty fast. There it is. You can also hit visualize. And then shows which parts aren't being rendered and which parts aren't. You can actually do the portals or turn this one off. Okay. And edit shows you the options or the actual cubes. This is pretty much a must while doing this. So right now frame rate is still, well, current frame rate of 160. Oh, whoop, that's bad. You can see, so I made a error with my occlusion culling. As you can see right now, nothing's being rendered, so we need to fix that. So I'm gonna hit something like so. Let's do 2 and this one to 4. Okay, and let's push all the way up to 100%. And let's hit big. Will probably take a little bit longer. That's fine. Oh, that was pretty quick. Let's play it again. So 160 FPS, 130. This is pretty damn good, if I say so myself. Got an error there though. This player isn't there. So you might want to fix that. So that's just the settings that we need to change a little bit. Let's do something like 10 and hit clear again. Well, first let's see what our FPS is right now without the actual occlusion baking. It's still not bad because we got 80, 90. It's still not bad, don't get me wrong, but let's just hit bake again. Okay, that was really fast. Oh, Ooh, casino baking. Oh, that's helpful. Let's do something else, like 6 and 3. Let's hit cancel for a second. Hit bake. Okay. You see what happened there? So we need to fix the settings even more. But this is nothing more but tweaking. So you just need to find the settings that you want. So I'm gonna make it even bigger, it's like 10, maybe 4. See what happens now. It's there, it's not there. See, it's. This should take some tweaking. You can see there as well in the background as well. So let's set this to something like 3 and this to 1. This might take a little bit longer, but it's fine. So this chops it up to the level in a bit more pieces, and gives the player a bit more, well, not the player but the actual camera, a bit more control of what part is shown and what part is not shown. Okay, let's check it out now. This should work a little bit better actually. Yeah, see. 145 frames per second. This is really nice actually. Nice and smooth. 200 FPS. Oh, that's much better. So all in all, this works a lot better. And keep in mind though that we're actually not in maximize on play yet, so that will even increase the frame rate by even more. So we can even go lower. Let's do 2 for example. It will take a bit longer to calculate, but this gives a better or a smoother transition. You can see it being chopped up into pieces. And we're done. Let's hit it. 160 is better. This is pretty damn solid frame rate if I say so myself. Keep in mind though, things that can really eat up your frame rate is, for example, the camera effects. Right now I've got a camera motion blur on it. This takes a lot of frame rates. I'm gonna remove it for a second. So I just got tone mapping. I'll show you what it was actually. I'm gonna remove all the effects for a second. So right now this is just the basic camera with no fancy stuff at all. I'm just gonna hit play. Frame rate is okay. I don't know why it keeps lowering down the frame rate once in a while, but it's just very weird. 60 FPS, even though we should have more. Oh, this is why. Okay. Oh, it's better. Much better. Okay. So let's check out some of the actual features that you can add to the camera, for example. So let's move our plate a little bit forward, something like here. You can see what happens though when you actually see which parts are being rendered or not. It's actually really cool. Okay, so let's place the camera here for a second so we can actually have a bit of a view here. Okay. Nice. So if you import the package called effects, this one, you get access to a bunch of free stuff they added in Unity 5, which are actually really cool. So then you can go for example to components and image effects, and then you got anti-aliasing, which is always good. I'm gonna edit there. Done. That's it. You can actually choose the preset if you want to. Maybe let's do screen space, anti-aliasing, and it shouldn't do that much for the actual frame rate. It just gives a nice anti-aliasing effect. That's pretty much it. Okay. So let's do another one. We got bloom. Be careful. It might look really good. I'll just show it. I'm not a big fan of bloom actually, but let's do it lower threshold so everything gets a little bit of bloom. It just makes everything a little bit blurry. Let's do it all the way up. See there's a nice bloom there. Um, be careful with this. It might look really good in some cases, but just be gentle with it. So I'm just keep it on though for a second, and I'm just gonna tweak some settings. So like the threshold a little bit lower, like 0.1. The intensity might be a little bit higher, like 1 for example. And the blur size, let's do 3. Okay, let's check it out for a second. So we have a small bloom around the fire, which is perfect. I'm gonna go occlusion tab. There you go. Nice bloom there, soft and gentle, and most of all subtle. Okay, so bloom can be helpful, but just be careful, don't overdo it, for the love of God. Motion blur, and just blur, regular blur. You also have camera motion blur and depth of field. This is a very cool setting. Let's hit visualize, so you can see the ports there are in black or in focus. The rest of it isn't. So you can, for example, like do this. Let's do a little bit closer to the camera, and let's do like this, for example. So if it's black, it's in focus, and if it's not in black, it's out of focus. And you can see here that it actually blurs it out. So you can even do more, like let's do the aperture a little bit higher, so you can see what it does. So it just blurs everything, except for that the part that are in the focal range. Like right now, the door here is in focal range. The rest isn't, so the rest is blurry. It looks really cool, but it's also very weird, because right now we're looking through a first-person controller camera, and you as a person, our actual eyes, we don't get depth of field. We just see things double. Depth of field is a camera effect, so it just might look pretty, but it's very unnatural almost. So that's why I tend not to use it, because it just looks weird on a first-person character. But for example, for a cutscene, this will look really good, because most of the cutscenes are done through a camera itself. So it has its uses, but not in actual gameplay, because it's also very distracting. So you might want to be careful with that. And vignetting and chromatic aberration, this is really helpful. Vignetting is actually used a lot in movies, because it focuses the viewer's attention on the center of the screen, because it just makes a black edge around the actual screen. Let's do it even more and see what it does there. You can also do a negative, but I just don't know why you would do that. But so it just adds a black corner around the actual edges, and it focuses the attention on the center of the part, center of the screen. Chromatic aberration is something else. It's a camera effect again. It just pulls the colors apart and turns it into, well, these separate channels are being pulled apart. Let's do the simple one. You can actually see here, if you look closely, you can actually see it double. Let's look at the light. You can see the RGB channels being pulled apart there. Like the red one here is very apparent. If you do it like something that's subtle, like 1, it's not that bad. But it's a camera effect again, so for a first-person shooter or whatever, don't use it. It just looks really stupid. Color adjustments though are actually really helpful, because you can actually color correct your entire game. So you can, for example, do the curves and saturation. You can actually opt the saturation if you want to. Let's do advanced here for a second, and you can give it more red, for example. You can add more red to the scene or more blue to the scene. But you can also see that it makes it really dark. So what you tend to do is first add the tone mapping here, which is just a way of brightening things up. Okay, let's do like 3, and then we can add the color correction curves. And let's add blue in there. You can actually see it tilt toward the blue. Let's make it a little bit brighter. Oh, this is the green, my bad. So let's give it more. Well, actually, no, it is not. Let's give it more blue. So it's a very cool way. You can even up saturation, and then you get even worse. It's like the one in Photoshop. It can be really helpful. It has its uses, let me put it that way. If you look up texture, you can actually use text for that, for color grading purposes. I'm not a big fan, but some people actually like it. A ramp, you can actually use a texture ramp to actually use the color correction for it. Unsharp mask, it just makes everything look sharper. As you can see, intensity just put it all the way up. This is pretty. Let's actually watch it in game. It's gorgeous. Let's not do that, right? So maybe even 1. So it just makes the textures a little bit more sharp. But don't. Just don't. No. Just no. Actually, let's get rid of this one. So don't do that. I'm gonna get rid of this one as well. Let's see what else we have. Grayscale sepia tone. This one is it just gives it a red color. You might not want to do that. Grayscale sepia tone mapping. We just did. Edge detection might be helpful. Fish eye, so the actual camera lens is a camera lens here, and you can actually see what it does. It can be, I don't know, maybe I don't know why I would use that. Global fog. It's also with the high fog that I explained earlier in this video show. Not really that cool, but this one though is really helpful. Screen space ambient occlusion. It just makes everything a little bit more, or pop out a little bit more. I feel a little bit more. Well, I would say like it has place in the world. First of all, I'm gonna add just a tone mapping. So face a little bit dark. I'm gonna move it a little bit up. Continue. Let's do 2. Let's do 2. Okay, so the ambient occlusion, you can tweak it. Hope it's visible though, but the intensity, just pull it all the way up. This will look really good. That's simple. This will look really good. You can see here in the corners there, it adds the ambient occlusion there, but also here, for example, there. It looks really good, but just don't overdo it, like I just did. So I'm gonna move the camera a little bit to the left, a little bit higher, so we can actually see a little bit more. Okay, you can see there, not a little bit better. So the intensity, you might want to tone it down to like something like 1. So it's still there, but not that present. The radius, so how big it is, you can go really high, or just nothing. Like 0.5 will probably work 9 or 10 times, but that also depends on your scale of the scene. Minimum C, so where does it actually start doing the ambient occlusion? Well, 0.01 is fine. Downsampling blur, you can even blur it even more if you want to, or no blur. Intensity set like 1 or 2, and that's fine. So these are the final tweaks that you do to your level, to your actual game. And by doing this, you can make it look better, hopefully. Okay. Let's do what else. We have noise. This is again also for a cutscene. This works really well, because then you get these nice noise effect on the camera, like grain. I hope you can see it, but it's there. But it mimics a movie camera, like a film camera. So again, for a cutscene, it's brilliant, but for an actual game, it's just very distracting. So I'm actually gonna up the intensity a little bit. The ambient occlusion. Let's make it a little smaller, 12.4. Yeah, 1 blur. There we go. Let's put on maximize and play. You can see here 11 FPS. It's brilliant. But let's go to our occlusion tab, so the occlusion is actually being drawn out. It's still awful though. I have no idea why, but probably because the occlusion isn't actually being done right now. Okay. I'm guessing it's the occlusion, but let's just do this real quick. I'm gonna get rid of the anti-aliasing for a second. We don't really need it that much. Let's see if it actually improves it. It does. Ish. Okay. We got the occlusion on. awful frame rate, but that's because of the occlusion baking not being done actually. So because that's something for in the build. When we now play it in the actual scene, the editor itself, and we go to occlusion, we now get a decent frame rate. But I think it's just the camera effects that is really fucking it up right now. So let's get rid of the bloom. Increase it by 5. Let's start with image occlusion. Get 10 and tone mapping. It doesn't do that much, but the occlusion is really heavy on it. We just lost like 5 FPS here. Tone mapping is even worse. So be careful when you actually start using. Okay, you can see here. Let's go to the visualize here. Let's go to game again. It's a pretty okay frame rate. Nothing really fancy. Because this stuff is being drawn right now, but it's fine. Okay, so I'm just gonna finish this game here, and then I'm gonna post it online somewhere, and I'm gonna post the scripts online as well, so you can have a look at it. Maybe I'll just post the entire project online, so you guys can have a look at it and see, maybe change some stuff or whatever, or just see how I did things. So I hope you all enjoyed this tutorial series. I hope it was useful, put that way. If not, well, too bad. I had fun at least, so that's all that matters. So again, next video about how to design a HUD, and after that I'm gonna do a tutorial on how to model a character, which will probably be a superhero. So I hope I'll see you guys again next time. Until then, have fun with Unity.